Hey, Mike.
Don, pleasure to be here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, man. Thank you for joining me.
My
Nice to have
pleasure.
you on the show. You're the money guy.
We are money peoples. Yes, that's what we do.
We now have everybody's attention. The money guy is on the line.
And rightfully so.
Yeah. So, Mike, you and I know each other through a club that we're in, a business club, and you're on the other side. You're in New York, and I'm on the West Coast.
That's correct.
So you're not only a money guy, you're a New York money guy.
New York entrepreneur, actually.
New York entrepreneur. I love it. So for those of you listening, you know that I'm a member of Entrepreneurs Organization. Mike and I met through our network there because I've had questions from a lot of listeners about how do I finance equipment. And so Mike is a leasing expert. He runs a company called Targeted Lease Capital. So I invited him on the show to talk to us about that in an environment where we're not actually sitting across talking from Mike live. So hopefully, Mike, you and I today can ask all sorts of questions so our listeners can be more prepared when they're sitting in front of a leasing guy, maybe even you.
Okay. Okay.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what your company does, and we'll start there.
I'm a 32-year veteran of the equipment leasing world. Yikes. That's where I get all these gray hairs from. Our company is funded with through a Wall Street group. So we've got all the capital we need. We lifted a group out of a bank up in Buffalo. So we've got all of these systems and the cutting edge technology that we need to do things all over the country. We're national in scope, and we're out there actively seeking equipment financing transactions to inject capital into, which means when a customer sits in front of a vendor and they pick the perfect equipment and machinery for themselves, they need to pay for it. Oftentimes they try and go to a bank. It's a very arduous task, very difficult. Our processes are whittled down to just a couple of short hours to give you the confidence you need to purchase properly at the time, at the point of sale.
Right.
That's what
And
we
so
do.
yeah, that's what our listeners need. You know, our guys have shops. There's a lot of invested capital equipment, everything from CNC machines to edge banders. They can be tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Forklifts, of course, moving material around. What kind of experience or what kind of examples do you have from the wood product manufacturing space have you financed before?
We've got a tremendous niche in CNC machinery here in the East Coast.
Oh,
Uh, so we have what we call private label vendor programs. Most of the time when you go into a vendor in this area and you go and ask for financing and they tell you they have their own, they really don't. We've got systems that allow us to become their back office financing. So they've
oh.
got expertise in financing really through us. So we're doing a tremendous volume in that type of equipment. We really come to know it pretty well.
So let me translate what I think you said and then confirm that I
Mhm.
got what you said. When I go into a industrial retail showroom and I'm looking at CNC machines and
Mhm.
they say, Dom, don't worry, we've got leasing for you. We'll take care of it. You're actually the back office behind that program.
Odds are pretty good that you're dealing with targeted lease capital already
Yeah. Wow.
with the private label programs for those types of vendors.
So this just supports the it's who you know
Absolutely.
theory. You're the it's who you know guy. I love it.
Really,
I love it.
really.
So let's take this up to the highest level because everybody listening here is a business owner. So they've got their own shop. They're in some sort of growth mode or in some sort of transition mode. That's why people are listening to this show. And the leasing versus financing versus I'll just buy it myself, I'll save my own cash comes up. Why would I lease versus just buy it? Let's start there.
Well, it's interesting because there isn't a tremendous amount of difference. The real big difference is the ease with which you can acquire financing from a company like us. Going to a bank, they're required by regulations, by all kinds of other systematic processes to gather a lot of information from you. They've got to know their borrower. They've got to, they try, actually, their real goal is to have your account. So they're really interested in a full-fledged relationship. We like to have relationships too, but we're really interested in transactionally closing your transaction with you, paying for that equipment as quickly and easily as possible. So the difference between a finance and a lease is not so varied. It's not really that different. What really is different is the processes by which you can work with a financing leasing company like us.
Mm.
Structurally, there are many different structures to leases. There are leases with fair market value purchase options, dollar purchase options, there's equipment financing agreements that we use. Depending upon the situation and the benefits to the customer themselves, we could structure any one that's necessary. And we get to know that by discussing things with our customers as they request financing. But the process is really the simplicity. For us, we take an application, we finance up to $150,000, maybe even $200,000 with just an application. So that takes us all of a 20-minute turnaround for decision, right? And when we go to document the deal, we do it via DocuSign, which means that we're emailing documents you can sign in your cell phone. So that too can only take just a few short minutes once you've arrived at numbers and so forth. So rather than go to finance something at a bank, which could take weeks and really be painful, have a tremendous amount of disclosure, analysis of your financial situation, how much cash you have on hand, and so forth. We've taken all that out of the equation. We go right to the point of sale, right to the financing instantly.
That saves a lot of time, especially in, those of us that live in cities where traveling, a 1 hour appointment that I have to travel to is not a 1 hour appointment.
No, not at all.
I got to shut down what I'm doing at my desk. I have to drive there. So that's an hour and a half in some cities. Maybe in some cities it's 2 or 3 hours. If you're in San Francisco,
in New York, it's at least 2 hours of travel. So
yeah, then you've got to go there and then you've got to come back again and you're out. So I guess there's some time efficiency here.
Well, really, time is money. From a financing perspective, time is money. And there's an old saying in the machine tool industry, the man who needs a machine tool is already paying for it. With that in mind, speed is critical.
Yeah.
Speed and accuracy and making sure that your deal is handled professionally, things are paid for properly and on time, correctly, documented correctly. All those things are really critical. And those are the things that we manage in our industry to whittle down to a very few short minutes.
I've heard leasing referred to as off-balance sheet lending.
Right.
Is that an accurate way to talk about it?
It certainly could be. So there are certain companies that will tell you that they would rather write the payments off than have a capitalized asset in their books. There are a good variety of reasons to do that. Many companies are in situations where they have budgets, and in their budget constraints, they're not able to buy capital equipment without going through certain board meetings and so forth. If you maintain an off-balance sheet structure to your lease, and I'll explain what that is in just a minute, then oftentimes those types of rental payments do not qualify as capital expenditures in these companies, and they can acquire these at the lower levels of management. But for those who are really not concerned with that as much and really just want to know the difference, if there is truly a fair market value purchase option on the equipment at the end of the term of the lease, then it really is structured as a rental. That's opposed to, say, a bargain purchase option or a dollar purchase option at the end of the lease, where you're really effectively financing this thing to fruition to own it. So if you're financing to own, it's an on-balance sheet transaction, and you'll capitalize it, and you'll depreciate it, and all the other benefits that you get. If you're going to have a true fair market value, just like an auto lease, when you go to return your car, there's a value there. It's a true fair market value to your auto lease. If we could structure it the same way, and we would, then you can keep it off your balance sheet and not show the debt and just simply write the payments off as a rental payment, as opposed to a capitalization and a depreciation. A lot of words, probably more than you wanted to know.
No. I think, so this is let me ask this question, see if we're down the right path. But one of the concerns I hear from owners in this industry is we got to watch our debt service ratio.
Correct.
We've got to watch our DSR. And the reason we have to watch the DSR is the bank is watching our DSR.
That's absolutely right.
So this conversation, if you don't mind, loop this conversation that we're having into that banking conversation about debt service ratio. Does leasing help in that convo?
It always keeps those ratios intact. In other words, you add more equipment and have the use of that equipment without affecting those ratios at all, because it's an off-balance sheet transaction the way we describe. The payments that you make will be rental expense, not a capitalized piece of equipment where they're going to have to see the long-term and the short-term debt broken out on the balance sheet. So in that respect, it absolutely maintains the ratios that you might require for covenants at a bank line.
And so for those of us listening to this as an audio or watching it as a video, that's how they do it. When you're looking at your competitor and think, geez, they're the same size as me, they do the same deals as me, how did they just take that big leap in getting that bigger edge bander, that higher output CNC? How did they get it, X, Y, or Z? this is could be part of that answer. They're being smarter with the movement of money in their company.
Oftentimes that is the answer. Oftentimes it's the ability to get the financing you need without affecting the overall picture of your company's balance sheet that enables you to grow.
Yeah. It's funny, money is cold. Talking about money is hot.
That's fun, isn't it?
Fun for you.
Do this every day. How much fun is that?
It's fun for you. Hey, you mentioned a word, fair market value, $1 buyout, and zero buyout.
Correct.
And because I've got you on the line, and some of our listeners might be asking that question, what is a fair market value? What's $1 buyout? What's zero? Can you give us that?
Yeah, and different pieces of equipment will dictate different styles of financing, really. If you're buying a computer, it has no value the day that you plug it into your desk. So you're not going to or a funding company wouldn't offer a fair market value buyout on that because our fair market value is zero. So we'll write $1 out lease or an equipment financing agreement, either or. So really it's ownership from day one. But when you've got some woodworking equipment or CNC machines or hunks of metal that retain their value, some of these things actually increase in value. So you've got to be careful. We actually assess what a value would be at the end of a term, 3 years, 2 years, 5 years. And we base the financing on only the portion that you're going to use. So the monthly payment will be lower. You're financing less, exactly like an auto lease. Most of the people out there have leased cars, and that's the easiest way for them to equate what a true fair market value would be. So there's a simple assessment that we do on our end. We understand the equipment. We know what the values are going to be. At the end of the term, we give you an option. You can finance the balance of this down to nothing, and it goes on your balance sheet. You can give it back, and we'll sell it, or you can buy it for cash, just like an auto lease. Exactly.
Just like an auto lease, yeah. So you guys know, and your team knows, you have the math to say, if we buy this forklift, let's say it's an electric forklift, it's set for this load rating, you know that after so many hours of usage, it's going to be worth, if you bought it for, I'll just use a silly number, 50 grand, 100 grand. Right. After X many hours, it's worth 25 grand.
Right.
That's the fair market value buyout that you would establish, right?
We finance just the part you're using for, essentially.
Yeah.
So
what are some ways that this is excellent? And I'm not you. I'm not anybody. I don't know. But there was a brief stint in my life where I actually sold money. I worked for a leasing company called Copelco.
I know Copelco well.
Oh yeah, they're from the Dutch Bank, De Laga, London.
That's right.
Those were some funny conversations, by the way, Mike, because I'd phone these guys up that were trying to finance a piece of equipment or something, say, hey, it's Dominic calling from Copelco. I understand you've got trouble getting financing.
Right.
And every once in a while, one of the guys on the other end of the line would be pretty sharp. He'd be pretty quick with his humor. And he'd be like, let me get this straight. I can't get money from the bank.
Right.
I get a phone call out of the blue from a guy named Dominic, who's from Copelco, who says he can fix my money problems.
That's right. And
then
no issues with collections either.
Yeah, I would play with him a bit too, because I'd say, well, we'll meet at Starbucks or something to talk about it and do the documents. And he goes, well, what do you look like? I go, well, I've got no neck and one eyebrow. Oh my God, this is not going well.
No, not at all. That guy's not missing a single payment.
No. And obviously I'm not that guy, but it is fun to have good times in business. But
you bring up an excellent point, though. You bring up a really important point. And the important point is our credit criteria is significantly different than what a bank's credit criteria would be. Time and business requirements are different. Maximums and minimums are different. Ratios are different. We don't necessarily take into consideration all of the leased equipment you have when you need another piece. We just want to make sure you can afford to pay for it. If you can afford to pay for it and it's going to make you money, we're probably in. We worry about things such as responsibility, FICO scores here in the States. We look at Dun & Brad's to make sure there's no outstanding crazy liens and judgments. But for the most part, especially the app-only program to 150 or 200,000, as long as you're clean, you're going to get your deal.
Yeah.
And you're right, apropos to a bank where banks are very stringent as to who they lend to and how they lend and when they're going to lend and what the ratios look like and what they should be.
Yeah. What's normal? What do you guys normally ask for paperwork to see for that information?
So about $50,000, we get an application, and the application is going to have the name and address of the company. Of course, we need to know who we're lending to. So we can do a background checks on Paydex, PayNet, and all those other fun things that we run behind the scenes. And then we ask for the ownership. And if you're a closely held company, we want to make sure your FICO score is clean. We don't look for tremendous scores necessarily. Generally in our industry, 650 and up is what we look for. Average in the country is 670 anyway. So we're not even looking for average. We just want to make sure your company's been in business a couple of years. We do take a bank statements over $50,000 because we want to make sure you've got enough to cover first payment, first and last payment. We found that if you don't have enough money in the bank to pay us, you're probably going to be delinquent. So we look for decent.
Hang on a second here, Mike. That sounds like some pretty complicated math.
It's crazy stuff. We're very sophisticated.
All that being said, I know I'm making light of it, but it is important. You guys are looking at the financial history of a business, but you're really just looking at the realistic part of an operating. But you kind of like old-fashioned lenders, like the way banking used to be.
Totally. You don't find bankers that come to visit you anymore and look around and kick tires and decide if you can make it or not. Our industry is much more like that still because we get a sense of why you need the equipment. If you have the decent contract coming up and you need this big piece of equipment, a little bigger than what you'd ordinarily finance, but you're going to make money with it. We feel comfortable if you're responsible to your debts generally, that you'll make money and pay us back.
Yeah. Do you ask to look at those upcoming contracts? If I'm going to be doing a fit out of a hospital, do you need to see that?
Only in extreme cases where really the credit is so borderline, we need to look for an excuse to approve it.
Yeah.
We're responsible for putting money on the street. We look for reasons to approve your deal. We need to.
This really is the old-fashioned way of lending.
It is.
Yeah, I love it.
Way different than the current environment in banking.
Yeah. What if I've never done a lease before? Some of the terms that float around. You explain fair market value, what a zero out, and what a dollar out is. What's the impact of me of doing first and last in advance? If I make a first payment and a last payment on my lease in advance.
It's not so much impactful. It's really the structures that we have. We know that a certain percentage of our deals are going to have problems. So we need to take some security. When we have a payment for security in the bank, we know that if there really is a problem, we've got X number of extra days to cure the issue, to make sure that we're whole, to make sure that if you really need us to, particularly in this industry where the equipment holds its value well, that we'll be able to move that stuff somewhere else and get you out of trouble. The trouble is you owe the money. And just like to a bank too, you would have to pay us. So if we can cure that problem by buying us some extra time, statistically, we know that there will be far fewer real issues with our customers.
Do you, changing angles a little bit here from your answer, you made me think about how the smart businesses are going about using money where money's available. Are you finding most people come to you through the vendor the company that's selling it, or do you get end users coming to you saying, hey, listen, I know we're going to be growing. I want to have a relationship with you. And then whoever I buy from, I'm going to bring you in. What direction is that flowing?
That's a big loaded question, way more than you think, and I'll explain why. So there are sort of 3 or 4 different types of equipment lessors. Even though we're all lessors, we approach the market very differently. There are equipment lessors with waves of guys, and I mean hundreds of guys banging phones, talking to every end user that Dun & Brad can put them in touch with on their lists. They spend $150,000 a month minimally. They've got a couple hundred people in these big warehouses, and they're banging phones to see who is buying something in the next 30, 60, 90 days. Can we call you back and get an application from you? And those guys do well. They do very well. Most of them, if they're run right, it's a very big shop, and you're a machine. Our company is vendor oriented, which means we go affiliate ourselves with vendors the best we can, so that at that point of sale, when you're sitting in the shop, sitting at the store actually, and you're purchasing from the vendor, he can provide you with what he needs at the point of sale, so that you don't need to shop around, wait for that phone call, wonder who that extra guy is on the phone who's happens to be calling you out of the blue like you did with Capelka, and get the referral right then and there. It allows the customer to have peace of mind. It allows the vendor to have peace of mind that this guy can actually pay for the stuff because we're in control. And that's our approach. We're a vendor-oriented shop. If there's enough volume, we look to do those vendor private label programs so everyone can capture the comfort level right there at the store. If there's not enough volume, we're happy to get the referral. That translates into, as many years as I've been doing this, into random phone calls that I get from customers that I've dealt with in the past. And I get those every day because once they do business with us, they get to know how easy and comfortable they are with us, and they'll call back often. So different approaches to the market, same results. One is more directed towards the point of sale. The other is directed towards overall customer relationships. They both work.
Right.
Just on what you build for.
Yeah. I think in a lot of cases, people listening already understand leasing, and they might have leases on certain pieces of equipment. And
most likely, yeah.
It's the off balance sheet side. It's the debt service ratio maintenance
Correct.
that I talk to lots of tradespeople in general all the time. And they're always, the limitations on growth are the machinery that can help them do a job faster, cheaper, better, because they're bidding against other guys who might have that machinery or a lower labor rate, depending on the type of industry they're in.
Right.
So all these little edges that people get, this is part of what you give. You give people that competitive advantage in the books.
Totally.
So they can bid smarter, more effectively. You can stretch out their payments and lower their dollar cost of acquisition.
A couple of things are critical from a business perspective. Matching income with expenses means you're not laying money out for equipment. Paying for it as you go and as you earn with it is actually so much more beneficial, because you need working capital money. You need money for materials. You need other capital requirements in your business that aren't necessarily going to come back to you if you take a big chunk and purchase something so capital intensive as equipment. So maintaining that your base of cash in the bank and allowing the equipment to pay for itself over time is a really effective way of making sure that you cash manage properly in your company.
Right.
And that's really what we offer. Right. There's no big down payments. We finance 100% of the equipment. So really, essentially, you give us first and last, and then start using the equipment to generate capital that makes those payments.
It's smart. It's leverage. I mean, that's the key. The word is leverage, and the smart companies are already doing this in some way or shape or form. Not trying to carry the whole weight on their shoulders. You're never going to do it if you try to save your dollars and put them aside for a new $80,000 edge bander.
The money never comes back. The money's in your company and somehow doesn't magically appear in 3 months. You get your 80 grand back. That never happens.
No, you need to use the money to make more money.
Right. And so the smaller companies who are afraid to take that leap into debt, those are the guys who usually save money and scrape it and go buy another machine. What they find is if they can finance it on or off balance sheet, it's really not significant to those smaller companies, that they can preserve the capital for growth, preserve the capital for materials, preserve the capital for marketing. And they don't have to worry about taking every dime that they just saved and putting into equipment.
That's fantastic. So let's start thinking here about some of the stories, some of the companies you've worked with. We're obviously not going to share names, but have you seen companies who've come to you once and, to buy this machine, and then they come back and go, oh, I've been needing a bigger machine now. And, tell us about some growth stories that you've got, and maybe use leasing as the theme through there.
There's so many. So, most of these guys who foray into debt and borrow for their equipment never realize that, by the way, we're a full service company, as many are, and they need new computers, they need software, they need office. So as they move from one location to the next in their growth, it's almost overwhelming until they sit down with us and we recognize that we can pile all of this stuff into a single lease and get you the computers and furniture and stuff like that you need, and the equipment and the machinery, and they generally, in this arena, they're moving from location to location because of capacity as they grow.
Yeah.
And there's so many other expenses that are involved in their day-to-day growth, in their growth process. So it's fun when they recognize just how much they can do with us and how it helps their company grow, how it helps ease that burden of growth.
Yeah.
Because the capital has to be really injected into a company. It's that growth phase.
I think the opportunity for business owners in this market, as it is in so many others, is to think a little bit differently and to look where other people have said, well, it's impossible, to ask the entrepreneur question. You and I know the entrepreneur question because we live in that world. The entrepreneur is not, I can't, it's how can I? And it's what if? And it sounds like leasing, the way you're explaining it today, is one of those options. It's how can I get what I need to bid faster, cheaper, better, and win more of the deals I want.
Part of the entrepreneur organization, you can imagine that I always think that way. So my role always is to try and inject that thought process into the customers so they can really understand how to take advantage of who they are. Because let's face it, 90% of the people we deal with are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It's
They don't
only
know that though, Mike. They don't like to say that. Now I'm saying it to the guys
okay.
listening right now. The word entrepreneur is way out there for a lot of guys. They're like, look, I'm good with my hands. I started building in my basement or my garage. I bought it from my dad, my uncle, my cousin, my brother. And now here we are. We're doing 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, 200 million.
Fantastic.
But they're still the same guy. And they're like, I'm not an entrepreneur. Yeah, actually, you are.
They need to give themselves credit. The fact of the matter is that they've invented and created who they are. They've invented and created their company. It's their little baby. And they're supporting themselves and their families and so forth. They need to take credit for who they are. But they also need to understand that they can have the luxury of thinking a little outside just being a machinist. Start thinking entrepreneurially about things, ways to grow your company. Debt that it involves, it's a good thing. If you have $100,000 but can borrow another 300, you get the capacity to have a $400,000 shop, right? And that's important because when you grow, it's not only what's in front of you, it's what's available to you.
Yeah.
And that's critical as an entrepreneur.
Well, Mike, the reason that people listen to this podcast is because they want to think differently and they want to learn new things. And, you're the first guest we've had on this show that's talked to us about the money side from a lending perspective and how leasing works. I'm sure there's people that are going to want to ask you questions. Mm-hmm. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you or find out, how leasing works or how it could work for them, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, the name of our company is Targeted Lease Capital. So the best way is to email me at mberg, M-B-E-R-G, at targetedleasecapital.com. And that's with me 24 hours a day. I can always respond. And I'm happy to help anybody who has any questions.
It's very New York of you to say that you're on it 24/7. The rest of us, we're not in the center of the universe, Mike.
Well, if I'm not on the phone, I'm eating bagels. So.
All right. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, it's M Berg, and Berg is B-E-R-G.
That's correct.
At targetedleasecapital.com. And for those of you listening and watching this on YouTube, as you know, on the website, we always put show notes. And in the show notes will be links to Mike and a transcript of this if you want to take notes and share it with your leadership team. Mike, thank you so much. Did you just give us your entrepreneur story for a minute before we wind it down? How did you come to be running a finance company?
Interestingly enough, I was an accountant. And as you can imagine, that is not the most exciting of lives.
Yeah, there's nothing interesting about that.
I don't mean to offend any accountants out there, but it's really just not an interesting life. So I kind of gave that up after only a year. At the age of 24, I answered an ad for a company that was an equipment leasing company. But back in those days, it was before computers. It was before emails. Everything was done by hand. And I was one of the few kids my age who could read a financial statement and determine if there were applications for the credits. So unluckily for me, about 3 months into my tenure, I came into work one day and found they were out of business. So I found a folder on my ex-boss's desk, and I took a ride into a neighboring town to tell them that I'm going to leave the business, but it's been nice knowing you, and I just want to kind of shake their hands and see if there's any way I could work out a job of some sort.
Yeah.
It still happens the guy that I met was somebody that went to my high school and knew some of my family members. So he told me back in 1986 to go incorporate. I'll give you a line of credit and teach you the business. And here we are 33 years later, and we're quite a sizable force in the marketplace.
Yeah, you are. That's an understatement, Mike.
Been quite a ride.
Yeah. It's funny how it's not funny. That's a fantastic story that's just full of moxie and cojones. But everybody listening has that same story. Right. I started making cabinets for my aunt. Somebody else asked me to make cabinets. Now I'm a cabinet maker. That story started 35 years ago. So you're the same as all of us. You just started from simple beginnings and just nose to the grindstone, finding smart ways to do what you do and do it better.
We're all the same. All of us are the same. We all have a different niche to offer, and we're all in the marketplace offering what we can, making a living, helping each other. That's what entrepreneurship is all about, and that's who we all are.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you've done a good thing today, Mike. You've helped a lot of people understand leasing, which could be it's a big ball of confusion for a lot of us. We don't understand it. So thank you for that. And for everybody listening, if you want to get in touch with Mike and just ask him questions or whatever you like, as we said, it's Targeted Lease Capital. Just contact him there and ask more information.
Well, the big mystery is not leasing and financing. For those of you watching out there, the big mystery is whether or not I'm actually wearing pants. And that's the mystery that we're not going to decide.
Whether you're wearing pants, this is great. For people listening on the audio, they're like, what? And for people watching the video, oh my God, Mike, don't stand up. Don't.
11, you're not going to find out. Not today.
All right. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us here on Cabinet Maker Profit System. We appreciate having you as a guest and really lending your wisdom on this finance side for us. It's a big question, and I think you'll get a lot of people asking some really smart questions of you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
My pleasure. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.